One. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 111. And I am here with my guest, Anna Perez. How are you doing today, Anna?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Anna, what have you been up to today? Anything much?
Just hosted my podcast today at 3 p.m. And other than that, kind of just, it was kind of a slow Monday for me. Did some reading up, always following the news, of course. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing crazy. Went to the gym, the normal Monday things.
So, what did you do on your podcast today? Who did you have on and what did you cover? Any interesting topics?
So I didn't have anyone on other than myself, but I talked a lot about the problem with all of these segregationist policies that the Democrats seem to be supporting right now. I don't know if you saw, but they had a segregated graduation at UC Berkeley. And then also the NAACP just released a press release telling Black people essentially that they shouldn't be going to Florida because Florida's racist and that they're not wanted there, which obviously is a lie. I mean, wherever you stand on DeSantis, whatever, I don't care. The point is, DeSantis is certainly not a racist, and neither is the state of Florida. That's absolutely absurd. And if you read the press release, it is so dramatic. But the point that I was making on the show today is that this is the same narrative we've been hearing from Democrats for years. As you know, as some, a scholar, a historical scholar yourself, if you look at the history of the United States of America, it was always Democrats that were responsible for these racist Jim Crow era policies, which is interesting because they continue to do the same thing today, and yet they also blame it on Republicans, how racist of a country we are. But here's the catch. I think Republicans are, in large part to blame for taking this crap from the left. And that was the final conclusion I came to.
Yeah,
I said,
not doing enough to fight against it, pretty much not being strong enough. Because one of the biggest criticisms I have towards the Republican Party is the Republican Party is not very good when it comes to organizing like fights against us. But the one thing that makes the Democrats so strong is they're so good at getting organized and so good, actually standing up for what they believe in. Keep going, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, they play the game of on offense constantly. They have a monopoly on the whole racial conversation because they play offense. They throw labels at conservatives and quote conservatives, right? I'll just say Republicans because let's be honest, many of them are not conservatives. But Republicans, they sit there and they actually defend themselves. And I always ask, when are you guys going to learn that you just literally have to ignore them? Donald Trump had a really good response one time when they called him racist. I've played this clip a lot of times on my show, but a reporter was like, what do you have to say about people calling you racist or something like that? I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And he said, he's like, I am the least racist person you will ever meet. And then he just walked away. And honestly, again, whatever you think about Donald Trump, fine. You don't have to like the guy, but that is the perfect response that we need to employ as Americans and, as Republicans, I would say. But the thing about Trump, too, that I think if we're going to, mentioned this on my show, if we're going to go there with him, despite the fact that that is his natural state, I think one of the mistakes he made in 2020 is the fact that he sort of acquiesced to the people around him who were telling him, no, you have to defend yourself against these racial attacks. So he kind of fell for it a little bit. But the left sets up this trap, and Republicans and Republican consultants tell their candidates to fall into it time and time again. And it's ridiculous because you don't have to defend yourself. If you know in your heart that you are not who they say you are, then why are you sitting here defending yourself? You're just playing their game. They're on offense and you're on defense. The only way we're going to turn the tables is if we stop playing along with their ridiculous game. All you have to do is sit there and say, read a history book. There was no party realignment. Democrats have always been the ones who are responsible for racist policies, for segregationist policies. And to this day, they're still in support of those things. The UC Berkeley segregated graduation is not a one-off. We've seen this in a lot of colleges, a lot of universities over recent years, and it's just gone under the radar because it's in a liberal stronghold. It's in academia, so no one's going to criticize academia. How dare we criticize it? Well, why is it any different if the left does it? Imagine if a conservative said they wanted to segregate an event. Imagine the outcry. Understandably
or imagine if a libertarian did it too, the mainstream media would be all over that too.
Right.
It's like
suddenly it's segregation when anybody who's not fat blue-haired leftist does it, but as soon as a leftist does it, it's for the black people, it's to help them.
Mm-hmm. So, Anna, when you look at this policy, right, of like the left using racism, to pretty much, to get their own ways, what would you say, like, was your favorite book that you read, like, that really woke you up to, like, the whole, Democrats' racist narrative stuff? Like, what really woke you up? What would you say was, like, your favorite book from any conservative that really woke you up to how, the elites and stuff use racism to divide people in identity politics? What was your favorite book that you read, or, like, political person that really, catched your eye on this?
I would say Death of the West by Pat Buchanan. And it wasn't specifically centered around like racism towards blacks or anything, but that just woke me up to the culture clash that we're seeing in the West, and how the West used to be the superior way of life. Like we used to, and we were talking about this before we started filming, but basically, we used to be able to sort of adhere to the same basic Christian principles. And whether or not you're Christian, that's not the point, or at least by faith. The American people agreed, and many of the founders were not necessarily, believers in God themselves, but they recognized the importance of adhering to a moral principle, which is, of course, Christianity at the time, right? So they decided that was going to be best for the unity of our country. And if you think about it, as I mentioned at the time, every single colony, the 13 colonies, were founded by differing denominations of Christianity. It's not like we had droves of Muslims coming over in the 16 and 1700s. No, we had Christians seeking religious freedom of differing denominations. Because if you look at Europe at the time, there were times when Catholics were persecuted. There were times when Protestants were persecuted. There were times when Puritans were persecuted. So they came here and they were able to escape that. So the point is, like, it wasn't until we started bringing people of other cultures into the conversation that we started to see issues. Now, that's not to say that the Constitution, the First Amendment, doesn't apply to people of other religions. It's just to say that if you come here, understand that you need to assimilate to our cultural norms, which are Christian cultural norms.
When I look at, like, Anna, when I look at, like, the 80s and 90s and, like, the early 2000s in America, this was really before, I would say, in my opinion, after 2001, after 9/11, that was kind of itself a bit of a cultural revolution, but, like, cultural change. But when you look at the 80s and 90s, whether someone was black, whether someone was white, whether someone was liberal or someone was atheist, everybody just seemed to get along back then. Like, I remember talking to a bunch of conservatives a long time ago, and they were saying to me how they actually thought that America had overcome the racism problem back in the 90s, And I feel like, all that, America that you grew up in and all the America that, we were supposed to know is no longer what it is. The America we have now is corrupt. It's controlled by corporations. It's not a constitutional republic. You can argue it's not been a constitutional republic since 1913 because of the Federal Reserve Act and the District of Columbia too. It's just not what it used to be. And it's sad to see, what the West, to see the West going down, because the West has given a lot of the world, so much great things. Like, the East has given the world a lot too, but I don't think the East has given the world, as much as the West has, and it's such a shame, Anna. So, Anna, speaking of that, tell me about yourself. So, what was your journey towards politics, and how long have you been in, like, the media industry of politics, like in podcasting and stuff, and what led you to that point?
Yeah, well, I've always loved history. History was always my favorite subject in school when I was a kid. It was something that I was very passionate about. And, a lot of what I learned in history was actually research I did on my own time, because as we all know, the school system is a mess. And even when I was a kid, it was a lot better than it is today. But I was in public school, and, let's be real, a lot of these teachers aren't exactly geniuses. And that's not to, make fun of teachers. I know many of them are very good people and they mean well, but the reality is people don't really know our nation's history that well. They're kind of just repeating talking points. But I wound up doing a lot of research on my own time. It was just something that I was very passionate about. And, my dad came here from Cuba in the 60s, and my mom's also Cuban, but she was born in New York. So on my dad's side, however, he did come here from a communist country, from Cuba. So I think that had a big influence on the way I saw this country. I've always had a deep respect for America because I looked at what he had accomplished when he came here, what my grandfather accomplished, because my dad was only a child when he came here. He was about 10 or 11 years old. But I look at this country and I'm so grateful that I was born here. And it's sad to see that, people really don't realize how bad it can be. And I know that sounds like such a 2018 talking point from the right, but one of the things that I think Abe Lincoln said this, and you probably know this quote, but he said that if America essentially were to be destroyed, it would be destroyed from the inside out, essentially. And I think that's what we're seeing today. We have this inherent.
And also Ronald Reagan said if America, was to become fascism would become in the name of liberalism, which yes. I kind of disagree with him on that. I disagree with him on that a bit, but I know it is true. It is true. He was right about that. I mean, personally, I'm a libertarian, so I'm not really a fan of Reagan, but it is what it is. But how was your opinion towards that quote?
Yeah, no, I think he's right. I actually tend to agree with that because if you look at what the left is doing, it does make sense that there is a sort of, it's funny. So I've done man on street interviews before where I've interviewed people. I live in DC. I've lived here for 7 years and I started my journalism career here. And one of the things I used to do, especially when I was working at Blaze TV, where I was a producer, I did some reporting there as well. And I used to go do man on street interviews with people and I would ask them, because remember during the 2018 era, the new thing was to accuse Trump of being a fascist, of Trump of being literally Hitler, a Nazi,
absolutely.
All of these
Yeah.
fascist labels. And so I went out there and I asked them, I said, can you actually define what a fascist is? 90% of the time, these liberals that were accusing Trump of being a fascist couldn't even define what the term is. And what they don't realize is a lot of the policies that they're fighting for would be considered far more fascist than anybody else. The idea of disarming the populace would actually only benefit the government because they're not arguing for the government to not have access to guns. They're arguing for the populace to not have access to guns. So they're saying, I'm okay with the government being armed, but not the people. And as a libertarian, I'm sure that's something you probably are not for. But
no, absolutely not.
I also believe in the horseshoe theory too, where, there are people who, that's a whole other conversation. I don't want to get too deep into that, but I do think that sometimes you can be so far left and so far right that it really doesn't even matter at a certain point. It just, the point is whatever you're supporting, you can sort of, and the horseshoe theory can be good too. I think that there are things that we can actually come together on with the far left. I consider myself fairly conservative. And so there are things that, for example, I look at AOC, not to go on a tangent here, but just to, finish my thought here. I look at AOC and I'm like, I may disagree with her on most policies, but one thing we can agree on is the fact that the people that we call moderates, the establishment class of politicians in the quote center, they're the ones who are destroying this country because they're the ones that are selling out to China. They're the ones that have no principles. They're the ones that are only here to make a buck. Okay. And those are the ones that are working for the elites. So that's far more of a threat.
Yeah. Absolutely. They're paid by the Federal Reserve. They're paid by the District of Columbia, which is the Act of 1871. They're paid by BlackRock, the World Economic Forum. It's just, it's such a shame because America, if you think about it, has, like I said, has not been a constitutional republic since 1913 because the Federal Reserve Act made it into a corporation. And it's such a shame. And I think, Anna, what your country needs to do, it needs to go back to the Constitution. It needs to get rid of the Federal Reserve. It needs to get rid of the corporations running. And I think, Anna, with all the interviews you've done on the street, what would you say was the most frustrating interview you did with a liberal? And what would you say was your favorite interview that you did on the street with a liberal, for one liberal that actually managed to give you a bit of a challenge?
I actually don't do a whole ton. I don't do a ton of man on street interviews, not anymore, at least. I used to when I was starting out, but I will say this. I think that my answer to that would actually be the same interview. I remember there was, it was right before the 2020 election and I was interviewing people about Joe Biden and I gave them it was an A, B, C, D, E test. And I was saying, who said this? And it was all these questions about how Joe Biden at one point said, we're going to put black people back in chains, saying or that
Yeah.
accusing the Republicans of doing that, saying all of these bizarre things, these racist things, these incoherent sentences. And I was interviewing people in DC, and none of them guessed right. None of them guessed that it was Joe Biden. I gave them a list of things. Of course, it was who said this? Was it Joe Biden? Was it Donald Trump? Was it Chuck Grassley? Was it? And I went through a list of about a few politicians. None of them guessed Joe Biden. And I had one interview with somebody who, when I told them the right answer, he was shocked. He was a nice guy. He wasn't like trying to fight with me. He genuinely didn't know. But that's actually what I find to be mostly the case, even in a city with people who are extremely politically active like in DC. I find that that's the majority of the situations that I encounter when I meet people and talk about politics that are outside of like the political media sphere. A lot of times they just don't know. And that is incredibly frustrating because it's like, for somebody like myself and like yourself and like a lot of people who are probably watching this, it's like, we listen to this stuff all the time. We read all the time. We're constantly keeping up with what's going on in this country because we care. But there's some sort of disconnect with the populace where it's like they're not really paying attention. They're just feeding right into the dominant narrative. They just assume that if it sounds racist, it must be Donald Trump. And it's like if they just paid a little bit more closer attention to what was going on in the world, they wouldn't be so blinded. They wouldn't be so blinded by the narrative. They would be able to say, oh, I remember when Joe Biden said that. They played that clip on Wrongthink yesterday, or they played that clip on this show yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like conservatives are not talking about these things. It's just that people, it's like they just tune it out. And that is incredibly frustrating. It's like, do you not care about your own country? Are you not willing to spend like an hour, not even an hour, like 20, 30 minutes a day just catching up on basic information about what's going on within your country? Like, I understand that there's all sorts of things going on. The whole Ukraine-Russia situation, that's incredibly complex. And I understand that, people who may not understand geopolitics that well, our school system, like I said, does not do a great job of teaching that. But for you to not care enough to take 20, 30 minutes out of your day to not understand the things that are directly affecting your country, especially when it comes to a presidential election like the one that I was talking about with that guy in the Man on Street interview in 2020, right before the 2020 election. Yeah. Like, there's something wrong with this country if people can't even do that, in my opinion.
Oh, it's the same thing here in New Zealand. In New Zealand, if you probably ask people, more in like, let's say, Auckland or Wellington, you go up to people and you ask them what's the difference between the Australian and Aussie flag, and they won't probably know, because the Australian flag has white stripes and the New Zealand flag has like red stars. Sorry, the Australian flag has white stars and the New Zealand flag has like red stars, and it's like the school system is just designed to make people dumb. So Anna, like I was saying about that, so tell me more about your political journey. So now obviously you're working for Wrongthink. So how long have you been working in conservative media for, and what led you to working in conservative media?
So I was thinking about this the other day, but it really wasn't a plan I had. I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to work in conservative media. What happened really, it was kind of funny. So I really didn't, I went to journalism school. I studied journalism, like the very standard practice of journalism. I was told that, even though I went to American University in DC, where I currently live, that I was probably going to have to go to some flyover state and work in some random city I've never heard of and be a local news anchor there if I did that, or a producer or whatever. But most likely I was not going to be able to find a job in a top 10 market as my first job. Top 10 markets are like New York City, Washington, DC, any major city, LA, whatever, Atlanta, cities like that. Like DC would definitely qualify as one of those. And so I was under the impression that that was probably going to be me. I was going to be a local news anchor, because I still bought into the idea to some degree that journalism was this thing worth fighting for, and that we needed muckrakers, and that if I could just, break into, mainstream media via local news, that I could actually do some really good work. But that was a lie. And it's funny. I'm so glad that I didn't wind up taking that route. And I'm glad that things ended up the way they did, because I never expected to be working in a top 10 market right off the bat. I actually wound up taking an internship with a company called CRTV, which now is Blaze TV. They merged with CRTV. Blaze already existed at the time, but we wound up merging with Blaze TV. Now, CRTV was a very small company at the time. I was writing for a few, or working with, I shouldn't say writing because I didn't write, everything, but I was working with a few big names, which I am so grateful to have had that opportunity. I worked with Gavin McInnes. I worked with Andrew Wilkow. I worked with, John Miller, who's, still a smaller name at the time. But it was an amazing experience because it was a startup and I was writing a lot and I was kind of thrown into it. I worked, I worked probably harder than most interns because I wanted a job there very badly. And so, because I was in my final year of college, so they wound up hiring me. I worked there, and we wind up merging with Blaze TV. Then I became Andrew Wilkow's producer, which was an incredible opportunity because I did not see that coming. I was the only one basically producing the show. Andrew's an amazing person, an amazing talent. I mean, him and John Miller, I would say I learned a lot from as well. And Gavin McInnes, just a lot of like creative geniuses in that atmosphere, I would say. And people can disagree with them, but they're very smart people and they know the industry well. And I was really lucky to work with them so early on in my career, but that really shaped not only my like approach to my work, but just this idea that like it's okay to think freely, because kind of what we were talking about before, the education system doesn't teach you to think critically. They teach you to be complacent. They teach you to follow rules. Nobody teaches you how to actually research, right? And I learned all of those skills there on the spot, on the job. And it was just an incredible experience because for the first time I was challenged with, researching the contrarian narrative, the contrarian viewpoints that, I was not really that conservative. I was sort of fiscally conservative. I didn't realize what kind of threats we were under in this country until I started to actually being forced to do a hefty amount of research. So that really shaped me as a person and also as a journalist, as somebody who worked in media. So I did that for a while. Then I wound up working at and that completely blew my mind and opened my eyes to what was really going on. And I realized, okay, this is my niche. I want to work with companies like this. And the thing is, most media will silence you. Even a lot of conservative media outlets will silence you. So it's very difficult to find outlets that won't do that. Okay. So I'm really glad that I started out doing that. And then I wound up working for Real America's Voice. I had a show there called Common Sense. And I also produced David Brody's show. I also co-hosted his show. I worked on a few other shows. I also did some reporting there. I did a lot at Real America's Voice. I was there for about 2 years. And then I'm now at LFA TV. My friend Jeremy Harrell, who I met at RAV because he used to have a show there as well, said, look, I want to start a company and I want you to be a part of it. It was a big risk, but it's a completely new media sphere for me because I've always been used to sort of the more traditional journalist, world. Because here's the thing, when I started getting involved in media, when I kind of came onto the scene started going to college in 2015. So that was right when everything was changing. To your point, 2015, 2016 was right when everything started to change. Donald Trump was running for office. It was a crazy time. That's when I came to DC. I moved here when I was 18 and began studying journalism. So, for me, when I started breaking into the industry, things were rapidly changing. Nobody told me that I could make it in digital media or that I could be in a top 10 market, and that there were other opportunities than just going to these random cities. Not that there's anything wrong with local journalism. I actually think it's a whole lot better than all these mainstream outlets. The problem is a lot of times they're controlled by the bigger, mainstream outlets. However, point is, nobody told me that this was an avenue I could take. So I've sort of been like pioneering this thing for myself because nobody sort of paved the path for me. I feel like I'm part of a group of people, not myself. I mean, not that I'm a big name, but I'm one of the people that sort of in 2015, 2016, and after that started to sort of make a career out of the what we were left, so to speak, when we started exposing the truth about the mainstream media, because we kind of made lemons out of lemonade. I mean, lemonade out of lemons. Oh my gosh, why am I jumbling that phrase? But you know what I mean? We kind of made do with what we were left with, which was this, just media industry that was in shambles because, Donald Trump had exposed the truth. A lot of people weren't trusting it. And a lot of us were just like, we're not even going to partake in that world anymore. And so slowly but surely in my career, actually, I would say pretty rapidly, I'm only 25 years old and I feel like I've experienced a lot and I've moved fairly quickly through my career because I've taken just sort of a different path. Most of my friends that work in journalism that went more mainstream path, they're desk assistants still. They're producers, like assistant producers. I'm not saying that that's bad, but the thing is, like, I think the path that I took is not only better for me, but I'm proud of the fact that I never I never acquiesced to anything that anybody told me. At no point did I ever put a job over my principles or over the truth. And there are times when I've had to have those tough conversations. I've walked away from good money, from good opportunities, because I decided, no, I don't want to be silenced. I don't want to feel like I'm beholden to anyone or anything. I want to speak my mind. And that's what I do on Wrong Think every day at 3 p.m. now.
That's really cool. So why did you? I remember I saw in an interview you were talking to a guy a long time ago, and you said you walked away from Right America Voice, and you also left other media outlets, and you also mentioned how there are some things that like conservatives, don't want you talking about. What would you like? How come you left, Real Voice America?
Yeah, so it's called Real America's Voice.
Sorry, Real America's Voice,
for short. Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. To speak in general terms here, because I think this is not just a one-off. This is a problem that we're seeing in media in general. People want to start media companies that are, quote, conservative because they saw that there was a demand in the market. There was a niche that they could fill, right? Fox News started to lose support after the 2020 election when they called it for Joe Biden. They had been losing support, I would say, for a while. And since then, they've been losing support, especially now that Tucker's not there. But the point is, a lot of these companies, a lot of business people started seeing opportunities. And it's not even that they themselves believed in the cause. Like, it's not like they stood up and said, you know what, I really want to fight for freedom in this country, and I want to stand up to this narrative, and I want to start a company that will bring people the truth. No, these are business people. They're here to make a buck off of your, off of you feeling as an American like you can't find the truth anymore. They're making a buck off of Americans. And that's kind of sad to me. And it's the wrong way about it. A lot of these companies are like this, and nobody says it. There's nothing wrong with making money, obviously, but if that's purely your intent, it's going to show at a certain point, because you're going to start acquiescing to advertising companies. You're going to start following the left's narrative to some degree, and you're going to start walking this line to appease the left and not upset them, because the left has such a vice grip on so many industries, and so many companies. And so instead of being what you said what you set out to be, right? You wind up becoming the thing that you wanted to replace, like a Fox News type of ordeal where you're just, basically parroting. You might as well just be a leftist at that point. And so a lot of these companies are like that, and they don't want you covering certain stories. Like in my case, I got a lot of backlash for covering the Ashley Biden diary situation at Real America's Voice. I got a lot of backlash from the company for, covering other stories there. They were not happy with it. And a lot of another story that went viral that I covered was the Epstein ties to the judge behind the Mar-a-Lago raid. And I talked about how, this is something that Trump is aware of. He's been trying to expose it for a while, the child trafficking problem connected to Epstein. I went through this whole rant, and it went viral. A lot of mainstream outlets were covering it. Real America's Voice didn't like that attention, I don't think. And so, slowly but surely, they were kind of pushing me out. I remember I wanted to do, this is before I joined LFA TV officially, but I wanted to do a hit on somebody's show. And now, mind you, I was never under contract at RAV. So there was no reason why they should be controlling any of my actions, or that they should have been. I was a freelancer. I wasn't even an employee. Okay. And so I was technically allowed to do whatever I wanted to do. I wanted to go on one of the LFA host shows that the network had just started, it just launched. I hadn't joined yet, but I had planned on joining, and I wanted to do a hit there. And they told me I couldn't do that. What they were trying to do was make my life slowly more difficult so that I would eventually leave on my own terms. And the reason why that's better is because, then they can't say, well, I was fired, right? Because that's a bad look for them. But it wound up being bad anyway, because they wouldn't even let me go on to say goodbye to the audience. They were scared. They were scared because they don't care about the truth. Most outlets don't care about the truth. They're just there to make money. And if you threaten their ability to do that, then you're out of there. They don't care about the truth. I mean, so many great people have been fired or have left companies that I know, that I'm personally friends with. And the ones that are still there, I get calls all the time from people that, work at various organizations telling me, because I have a lot of friends in this industry that I've made over the years, telling me they're not happy where they are. and they'll tell me things. Oh, well, I wasn't allowed to say this or I wasn't allowed to do that. And yeah, I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. And so, that's why I was so happy to be a part of LFA TV, because it's a group of people that actually care about the truth. We don't really make that much money from doing this. We do it because we care and we want to tell people the truth. And, I took a big pay cut to do this. If I cared about money, I would probably be at some random mainstream outlet parroting whatever talking points they wanted, reading a teleprompter that was written by a 20-year-old. But, I'd rather tell people the truth, and I'd rather be a principled person and actually tell. And if what, people don't like it, whatever. But at least at the end of the day that I'm giving you my real opinion. I'm also giving you real facts about the situation and drawing my own conclusions. Nobody's whispering in my ear to shut up. No one. I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't check in with Jeremy, who is the CEO of the company, before I do my show. I just talk about what I want and what's important to me and what I believe is important to the American people. And I listen to them too. I care about my audience. I care about what they want to hear. I care about what topics they want me to cover. And nobody else seems to be doing that. Nobody else seems to really care. And that's the biggest problem that I see right now.
Yeah, there is a lot. One thing I've noticed, Anna, is there's a lot of clout chasing going on the right. And ever since, we're starting to see, ever since like 2021, going back to the Jack Murphy incident that happened, it seems to be, I mean, obviously, there's always been clout chases going on the right and the left, but ever since Jack Murphy's situation, like, it kind of opened Pandora's box, because you had a lot of other scandals that came out. I'm not going to name all of them, but other scandals that came out with, someone at Blaze TV or someone at the Daily Wire or someone like that. And I kind of feel, like you mentioned there, a lot of these people are just like the left-wing media. Like, a lot of these people don't care about the audience. They only care about the clock chasing. The money is in there pretty much all for them, and that's what it is. And especially, I'll give you one incident. One thing that's happening now is there was a guy called Christian Pierre. Have you heard of him? Christian Pierre. And he worked I actually had him on my show. Really, really nice guy, by the way. Very intelligent. You should actually, check him out. I'll send you a link to him after we finish the show. And he was working for Right Side Broadcasting Media, and he was wanting to make a meme about Ron DeSantis, the meatball Ron. And then all of a sudden, the Right Side Broadcasting Media ended up firing him for that, which was absolutely outrageous. And I was thinking, well, that's just stupid, because a lot of these conservatives, especially on Right Side Broadcasting Media, will claim they're for freedom of speech, and then Christian Pierre will be fired. And it's just like, it's absolutely nonsense. No one should be fired just because, it's really a shame, Anna, what's going on, with the conservative side of the media, especially in a lot of other Western countries, because the way I look at it, Anna, is I really feel like, we're starting to see a division. The Conservative Party, is splitting into two sides. You've got the Ron DeSantis group, you've got the Trump group, and you've also got Kanye's group, which is not really influential, because Kanye, campaign didn't really, succeed that well. It's just not good for America. It's not good for America to have a divided, like, conservative side, because it's just not good, because a lot of go ahead, Anna. Sure, go ahead.
I would say I actually disagree with that to a degree. I actually think what we're seeing is a Republican action. We're seeing what it looks like when people start to think for themselves. And I don't have a problem.
Oh, absolutely.
With people have differing opinions, or that, people are sort of fractured on all of this. I think that's just the free market of opinions, right? Or the free market of ideas. But the reality is, I think you have a point where, as the Republican Party, as far as the Republican Party goes, they have a hard time, finding unity on anything, where there's a lot of infighting going on, and that cannot honestly hurt us from actually accomplishing anything when compared to the left, which they tend to have a lot less issues with that.
What would you say, out of all the issues right now, that is really like, what subject and what topic in the political atmosphere is really dividing, like, the conservatives together and really, making them betray each other and stuff? What would you say is, like, the biggest thing, like, that's making them betray themselves? And when it came, and, like, what would you say, as a person as yourself who's worked in media and stuff, what would you say, like, whoever's given you advice, what would you say was the best advice, like, whether it's been Gavin McGinnis or someone's given you, to watch out, like, for, to know the clues if someone, is using you or backstabbing you in media? What would you say, like, listening to the audience now, what would you say to, like, what clues would you give to the audience here to watch out, for grifters and, red flags? for people who want to become future journalists in the future.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll answer the first question, which is what I think is the most sort of, I guess it was the most contentious issue right now for Republicans. I would say that's kind of what we were alluding to earlier, which is freedom of speech. I mean, we claim to be a party that, espouses all of these constitutional rights, freedom of speech, we cry, right? But then we look at somebody like Ron DeSantis, who, just recently signed a bill into law in Florida. Well, actually, not even in Florida. This is the crazy part. He went all the way to, and this is actually a two-parter. He went all the way to Israel to sign a bill that would essentially, hamper.
It would make it, so, but if you're someone who was to protest against Israel, or if you're someone, and do anti-Semitic, you would get arrested, which,
If you look at the bill, there are specificities that, are included in there, but essentially, to your point, they would treat it as a trespassing violation, which you could be thrown in jail for. Now, the problem with this, which is the entire reason why we have free speech in this country, is who is to then say whether or not something is anti-Semitic? How do you define whether something is anti-Semitic? Because if you're flashing a flashlight, for example, on somebody's house, and for whatever reason a shadow created a swastika, I mean, it looked like a swastika. Do you then get a trespassing violation because it looked like a swastika? Well, who gets to determine whether or not it's a swastika, right? So that's the problem with these things, is that who gets to decide? And also, are we going to then apply this to every single minority group? Are we going to apply the same standard to Black people, to Hispanics? Like, it opens up Pandora's box, and it's just a horrible idea. And what's interesting, and this is what's going to bring me to my second answer to that, because I have two big issues. I think we fail a lot of times with conservatives when it comes to free speech, like Ron DeSantis just did in Florida. But then in addition to that, when it comes to foreign policy, because he just went to Israel to sign that law. We use taxpayer money to send this guy to Israel to sign this bill into law. How ridiculous is that? Why couldn't you have signed it here? And why are you so close with Israel? Why are we giving so much money to Israel? Let's have a conversation about that, right? I mean, it just seems ridiculous.
Oh, exactly.
And then on top of that, that brings me to the whole point of like our foreign policy here. I'm sick and tired of seeing Republicans do stuff like that. They do it with Ukraine too. If you look at what Mike Pence has to say and what Nikki Haley has to say about giving money to Ukraine, they're all for it. Literally the only candidate who has said, I want to stop this madness, is Donald Trump, essentially. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he's the only one who said, no, I don't want to be Zelensky's sugar daddy anymore. The other candidates, no, they make the claim that being Ukraine first is being America first. I don't want a president or any sort of political person.
How on earth is being Ukraine America first? Because Ukraine has got one of the most corrupt governments in the world. It's got a huge sex trafficking problem. It's a corrupt state. It's never been united. President Zelensky is a war criminal, especially when you look at the issue that's been happening in eastern Ukraine, when they say they accuse the Russians of bombing, eastern Ukraine, bombing Ukraine, but yet they ignore the fact that the Ukrainian army has been killing ethnic Russians since 2014, and eastern Ukraine wanted to be a part of Russia, back in 2014, and then you got the annex of Crimea that happened. And it's so funny how, like, Nikki Haley and Mike Pence basically claim to be, people of the Western values, but yet they're giving taxpayer money away to like far-right neo-Nazi groups like the Azak Battalion, and they're also giving money to like ISIS and stuff like that, which is just, it just shows you how much of frauds they are. It's just insane. It's just.
So I think foreign policy and free speech are going to be some pretty big issues when it boils down to just those two things. I mean, obviously there are many other issues, but look, I mean, if we don't have somebody who's going to put an end to this madness, we are going to be in a World War III, I think, before we even think we are. Certainly, if Joe Biden is in for another 3 years, I predict that will be the case. And I don't think that Nikki Haley being in office or Ron DeSantis, that they're going to actually do much. The only person who can categorically put an end to this is Donald Trump, I think. He's the only one that will, and the only person who can, because he's been there for 4 years already. He knows what these people are like. He knows what it's like to work with deep state hacks like Zelensky, and he knows what it's like to work, to have to, stand up for this country and demand respect from people like Vladimir Putin, who greatly respected Donald Trump when he was in office.
Oh, so, he did. That's true. That's definitely true. Vladimir Putin, who I think is a good leader, in my opinion, I think he's better than Trump. And I think, like everyone says that Russia's a dictatorship, when it's actually not. It's a federation democracy. It has its own political system and its own voting things. It's just, Anna, what is your opinion towards Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Because, like I said, I'm not a fan of Trump. I used to be a fan of Trump. Personally, I would prefer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over, Donald Trump. What do you think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? And, like, do you think he's a good president? Sorry, do you think he's a good candidate? Do you trust him? And what do you think about the fact that, that Joe Biden is not willing to debate him in the Democratic primaries, which is absolutely ridiculous?
Well, look, I'll say this. I'm not surprised in the slightest that Joe Biden is scared of Robert F. Kennedy. He's far more, articulate than him, far more intelligent. Now, obviously, he has his stuttering problem, but that's not really something anyone can help. He's still mentally there, unlike Joe Biden. So I think Joe Biden would be scared of debating a vegetable. But that's another thing. I mean, I think as a candidate himself, from what I know about Robert F. Kennedy, I know two things. One is that he's very anti-vax, which I appreciate. I'm unvaxxed myself. I will never be vaccinated. I think that was a horrible thing that we did to the American people and to the entirety of the West by forcing them to get vaccinated and lying to their faces. Not that this is the first time the government has lied about stuff like that, about working with Big Pharma. Point is, I think that's a great stance. I wish, and I always have said this, I've wished for a while that was a stance that Trump took. However, he's not really talking about the vaccine anymore, which I think is a good thing. And I appreciate other things he's doing. But, Robert F. Kennedy, he's definitely the best Democratic candidate. Now, one thing I will say for him that I would say for somebody like yourself, I know you're not, an American, so you wouldn't be voting anyway. But for somebody who's maybe looking at him, is maybe more in the moderate category, or at the very least, just as a very strong anti-vaxxer, on the right, is maybe looking at him and saying, oh, that could be great. He could be good. He's also against the central bank digital currency thing that they want to start,
absolutely,
which is also great. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, and he also wants to end, the Federal Reserve, which is one of the biggest, For me, right now, obviously, I would go for a libertarian candidate, but right now, I mean, Spike Cohen's okay, but there's no one, really in the libertarian candidate. I would think, that's up there. Larry Sharp's not too bad, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Anna, what would you say? Go ahead.
I just want to mention briefly, he is, to my understanding, very anti-Second Amendment. So that's something to watch out for, especially for, libertarians out there or conservatives who, obviously we want our Second Amendment rights. So that's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point you just pointed. So, Anna, I heard that apparently you were mentioning to me that you interviewed Donald Trump. When you interviewed Donald Trump, what would you say was your favorite moment in that interview you did with him, and what was your favorite answer that you got from him?
Yeah, so I actually got to meet him in person. So the interview I participated in was a phone interview. And I did get to go to Mar-a-Lago, meet him in person. We were there for a interview with David Brody for CBN. David Brody worked for both Real America's Voice and CBN at the time. So we were there, and he's just an amazing guy, the friendliest person. I actually had an amazing interaction with him that I'll get to in a moment. But I would say the question that I really enjoyed asking him and hearing his response in was just, by the way, he's such a conversational person. He's so easy to talk to. There are people that intentionally make you feel lesser than them when they are the president or an important person. Donald Trump is the friendliest, just easiest person to talk to, I have to say, and I love that about him. But one of the things that we talked about was the deterioration of American heritage. And at the time, this was 2022, I think, 2021, I believe. It was right when they knocked down one of the Confederate statues. I believe it was Robert E. Lee. And we talked about that. And he was saying how it's whether or not you like this guy, whether or not he's a Confederate, this is a complete destruction of, our heritage as a country. Now, the left likes to call that racist and everything and whatever they want to label it as. But the reality is, it's a destruction of our culture, of our history. What they want to do is completely destroy our history and rewrite it as something else, which is something we also talked about. And his answer was actually was not shockingly, but very profound. I didn't expect to get such a long answer out of him. I was lucky that he took the time out to do that. I know he's obviously a busy man, but he was, very enthusiastic to talk about that. And I think he really cares about our culture and our history. You can totally tell when he talks about things like that. And he also cares about beauty. And nobody talks about this. I've talked about it on my show before, but art actually is an indication of where we're at in society. And, when you start taking down beautiful statues, when you start taking down artwork, when you start attacking the things that make this country aesthetically beautiful, you're attacking, you're attacking truth. Beauty is truth. And, that now if you look at all of these statues that are being erected today, there are these disgusting blobs of I don't even know what.
Oh,
like the
it's
MLK
absolutely
statue.
hideous.
Yeah.
Modern culture is just absolutely
So
disgusting, especially
bad.
what they're doing in Paris and Belgium and Switzerland and Austria and Germany. All these beautiful buildings, whether they were from World War II, whether they were from this, it's just absolutely ridiculous, that they're getting rid of and replacing them with these toilet-looking material things. I remember a long time ago I watched this video by Paul Joseph Watson about the truth of modern art. Look, personally, Paul Joseph Watson, I'm not a fan of him in person. He doesn't really sound like a very nice guy in person, but he makes good political videos. And that video was really good. And it's true. When you have a culture that gives you bad art, that gives you bad music, things are going to be shit. And I think the biggest problem, from what we've seen from 2000 to 2022, it's just the decline in movies, the decline in art and Western culture. This is the reason why, to be honest, Anna, this is why classical music and opera music is my favorite genre of music, because it's a music that pretty much touches the soul. It touches your heart. It's absolutely messed up. Anna, what would you say is your favorite type of artwork in history, and your favorite type of art piece in history, out of all of humanity? And what would you say is your favorite philosophical quote from any American, politician or leader in history?
Well, I love the Sistine Chapel. I mean, I think that's probably an easy answer, but I actually was an art history minor for a little while in college. And so one of the really interesting things to me is the transition between the medieval time period and the Renaissance time period as far as the art goes. You could see that the Renaissance was truly a time of rebirth. I mean, that's really what it means. So, you see the dimensions. They were taking into account dimensions, their ability to understand lights and depth. It just, you could totally see it between those years. And, you could see the difference between Eastern European artwork and Western European artwork. So that to me is fascinating. Everything you just mentioned there, I love Renaissance art. But I also have an appreciation for medieval art. I also think that's, I think that the beauty of that time was there was such a focus on faith and discipline as a society. I mean, life was very difficult back then, obviously. And I think one of the things that we miss in modern culture today is this sense of discipline, of duty that we don't have. And I think we're missing it particularly among young men. So I think that's, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I just wanted to basically emphasize that, yeah, I have such an appreciation for that artwork. But I mean, the Sistine Chapel, that, and also probably there's so many churches in Europe. What was the cathedral that burned down recently? That was a few years ago. It was
in France. It was in the Notre Dame. Notre Dame. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
What a beautiful building.
Have you ever been to Europe before, Anna?
No, I haven't actually. I'd love to go. I know it's crazy.
What church in Europe would you really love to go and see? And one that you think has the most beautiful artwork, and the one, that has the most Christian feeling to it, one where you feel like Jesus is reaching your soul?
Well, it's hard to say because I've never actually seen it, but obviously I'd like to see the Sistine Chapel. That's probably one of my first, but I'd also like to visit the Vatican. I'm not a practicing Catholic currently. I'm actually non-denominational, but I was talking about this the other day on a work call. I have such an appreciation for the beauty of the architecture, the Gothic architecture of a lot of these buildings. I do love the look of Catholic churches. So, just because I am no longer, I'm a Catholic. One of the things I don't like, or I shouldn't say I don't like, but one of the things I wish wouldn't be the case with non-denominational Christianity is I wish that we had, nicer buildings, just, because beauty does matter. There is a point to be made about aesthetics. But we often, have the church I go to now is in sort of a warehouse looking building, which doesn't matter. Obviously what matters is the faith and the people in the congregation. However, like I said, there's a case to be made for the fact that beauty matters. And so, I have such an appreciation for Catholic churches in particular. But I'd love to see the Sistine Chapel. I'd love to see, the Vatican. I'd love to just, honestly, I mean, I don't even know where to start. There's so much. I'd love to visit Scotland too. I mean, just yeah, even not even churches, like castles, just so many amazing buildings.
So, speaking of that, Anna, what would you say, is your favorite thing about working in your media organization? Sorry, the organization Wrong Think. Like, what's your favorite thing to work there, when working there?
So it's not an organization really. So the show itself is called Wrong Think with Anna Perez. That's the show I host. But the organization, the TV network I work for is Live from America TV. So we call it LFA TV. But one of the things I love about just being with this group of people in particular is sort of everybody, has this teamwork attitude, and everybody definitely wants to kind of pull their own weight. I've worked with a lot of anchors in the past that kind of didn't have that attitude in the slightest. And I find that it's very rare to find people in this industry that really, really want to work hard and really, really want to, are willing to put in the effort. Like in the past, I've worked with a lot of people who don't want to do anything. They just want to be on camera. And I think that's the problem with this industry too. I know we were sort of talking about this in the beginning, but you see this with a lot of like, e-girls, a lot of like TPUSA e-girls
absolutely,
sometimes.
Absolutely. I'm not saying okay. We're not saying like all of them are bad. There are some really nice people in Turning Point USA, but a lot of them but a lot of them do have that problem.
A lot of them.
Like you were saying, keep going.
No, I was just saying a lot of them are clout demons, and what I mean, obviously I use that term facetiously, but no, they are people who want clout, that they're a lot of times they're seeking recognition. They just want to feel, a lot of women do this. They want to feel important. They want to put themselves on TV. It's all about the glamour of it. But if you're doing it the right way, it's really not a glamorous industry at all. Like for example, we were in Iowa. We were, getting our hands and feet dirty in the mud trying to cover this rally, and like there was no room for like trying to look good or anything of the sort. Like when you're on the ground and you're covering these things, like if you go to the border, any place where you're actually investing your time talking to people, you're not in like an enclosed anchor setting, and you're actually doing the research, you're spending hours reading, because a lot of this job like that I do for a living, 90% of it is me reading, doing research, and writing and doing all sorts of things in the background nobody really sees. The easy part is going on camera and talking. That's the easy part. But putting the show and just to let you know, I didn't really say this, but I pretty much by trade, I would say I'm a producer. I'm a writer. I'm not really an anchor. I actually didn't really set out to be on camera. I kind of was more in the background. I had always written for people. So my real skill set, I think my strong suit is in writing and producing, researching. So for me, kind of being on camera, it was more about getting the credit for my own work rather than like actually being the face of my own show. Like I didn't care about that. Like I don't care whether it's me or somebody else. I just want the truth to be told. But I think that a lot of people in this industry are not in it for the right reasons. And what I love about LFA is that nobody cares about sort of the glamorous aspect of it. Everybody's there to work hard. We're all fairly young. We all, wanted to build something together. Nobody came in and said, all right, Jeremy, I'm going to need a hair person, a makeup artist. I'm going to need a producer. I'm going to need a writer. I'm going to need this. No, we literally all do our own thing, and we work really, really hard to accomplish something that would normally take like a whole team of people to accomplish. Like what the production, the level of production that we're able to accomplish with the little resources that we have is honestly mind-blowing to me. I didn't realize that people were that talented out there until I started to work with these people. And not to amp up the network I work for, but I truly mean it. I don't lie about these sorts of things, as you can tell. I just disclosed a lot about another network I worked at, and the reality is most of them are not as great as the one that I currently work for. And I have a special appreciation for it, given that I've experienced so much, that is not like this.
That's very good. I also see that Isabella O'Reilly, is that the organization too. That's really awesome. Yeah, she does a lot of good work too. I saw the video that she did with Laura Loomer. That was pretty good too, how they were discussing. So yeah.
I have such a
Anna,
deep respect for she's so funny because she calls it like she sees it, and that's so rare. People are always so scared to say mean things or to be called a racist. She doesn't care, and we need more of that, I think.
what would you? I noticed like Isabella likes to do a lot of funny, tweets. What would you say like is the funniest tweet Isabella tweet? The funniest tweet that she's ever done. That one that really made you laugh.
I mean, honestly, I don't follow her Twitter feed that closely, but I will say I think one that I don't know if it's the funniest thing she's tweeted out, but one that made me laugh recently probably was her saying, "If you're fat, unfollow me now." I'm like laughing as I say it because it was so funny. I mean, look, she's hilarious. She's just, and people don't get it. People are so dumb because they're used to being in a dumbed down society where you can't appreciate humor. We have such a humorless culture that people look at a lot of her jokes. She has very dark humor sometimes, which I appreciate. And, I think most people would if they actually understood it. But I think part of the reason they come after her so hard too is because she's an attractive woman. And people oftentimes, what she does is so genius because she takes like a grain of truth and she kind of turns it into hyperbole and then makes a joke out of it. Like she'll say something, and I don't know if she's actually said this, but along the lines of something like, "Oh, all fat people should die," which I don't know if she's actually said that, but if she did, I would know it's a joke because she's obviously, that's just her humor. But people are kind of stupid and they don't understand humor anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely lost its way, Anna, like humor has. So, Anna, before we're obviously close to an hour now. Before we finish off the show today, what is your opinion on like the fact that Title 41 is going to be ending and like you're going to have all these immigrants that are going to be crossing the border? And I've seen videos like where Owen Schroyer is seeing like these, guards not doing anything about it. Like, are you planning to go and cover? Like, are you planning to go and visit the border and cover the Title 41 thing or no?
Yeah, no, Title 42 ending is
42,
it's
sorry.
very, very scary for this country. LFA TV, the network that I work for, we do plan on covering it. I think we're sending I believe this is in the works. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe we want to send Will and Matt to the border to cover this. We sort of rotate the different things that we cover. I just covered the Trump rally that was canceled. So we're going to, I think Will and Matt, and they're going to do Ryan. His last name's Matta, so I always call him Matt accidentally. But Ryan and Will are probably going to cover the border situation there. But no, you're absolutely right. It's terrifying. And what people don't realize is it's not just like, families that want to come here and start a better life. Like, no, a lot of times there's single males.
It's gang members, right. Cartels. And you know what's so messed up? I saw a story, Anna, where I think it was on RT News or Sputnik or maybe National File, where someone was talking about how this young girl was impregnated by 9 guys. I think that was a story or something like that. And you're having stories of like people getting sex trafficked. Yeah. You're having stories of, like some people, who live on the border or who live on the border side see like dead bodies washing up on the river of kids or like someone, like there was someone, pretty much, found a girl, who like a young girl who had like condoms in her bag, and it was just because the cartel members gave it to her. The sex trafficking that goes on. I remember I was on a Twitter space listening to Sargon, and he was mentioning to me about how like there are some pedophiles in America who can actually, go to the cartel, and the cartel can help get them like young girls and underage girls, for them. And it's absolutely fucked up. It's so fucked up.
Yeah,
Anna?
That's really the only way to describe it, honestly. As to your point, effed up. I mean, truly, you're absolutely right. It's so well organized that it's scary. And it begs the question, and I talk about this sometimes on my show, but, the fact that the Democrats want this border to be wide open, they also tend to have connections to Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of these elites do. It begs the question, is there a connection there between leaving this border wide open, allowing cartels to just come through as whenever they please, to your point, having literally this organized sex trade going on? What is going on with the elites and leaving this border wide open? There's got to be a connection there.
Because it's all a part of Agenda 2030, the New World Order. It's all a part of it. The mass immigration, it's all a part of it. Anna, when you've like studied the border crisis, when you've studied about the border crisis that's been happening in America, what would you say, like, out of all your years of studying it, was the most heartbreaking story, like you heard, like from an immigrant, who was crossing the border, or like from a border control agent that you actually like heard from anyone or you've interviewed, like from covering this issue, like the most heartbreaking and the most scariest story.
Well, my good friend Ben Berkwam, who's a correspondent specifically for the border, I used to interview him a lot when I was at Real America's Voice. That's where he works currently, and he does probably some of the best work at the border out of all the reporters I've ever spoken to. And he was telling me all about these things called rape trees. I'm sure a lot of people know about them now, but at the time when he was exposing the story to me, not a lot of people were talking about it. But basically, what these cartels will do, what these gang members will do, is they'll put girls and young women's underwear on trees and like hang it there, and their bras and underwears and underwear and all sorts of like just it's disgusting.
Wow,
as a trophy.
that's absolute,
showing that they raped
that's messed up
little girls or young women. It's and children. It's just, I mean, he'll get into the details. It's such a like a sad story. It's almost hard to like he sees this stuff on a daily basis. He sees like bones of people who were killed, and it's just it's wild. It's just wild. And like I said, now people are finally seeing the truth about all of this, but there was a long period of time when nobody A, wanted to talk about it, and B, just these things were just finally being broken by people like Ben Berkwam. But before that, nobody was talking about it.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I just think it's absolutely messed up. And, it's funny how, have all these feminists who go on about how they're against rape and stuff, but yet why aren't they protesting at the border, protesting all the sex trafficking that's coming on, when especially that's a problem, when that's one of the biggest problems in the world. It's so funny how we'll see a protest for like climate change, or a protest for something like climate change, which is a load of bullshit in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have a freaking like something like, because someone said something mean on Twitter, but we won't have a protest, about something like sex trafficking, which is an even bigger problem, which is one of the biggest problems in the whole world right now. It's just absolutely outrageous, Anna. Anna, did you also see this article I saw, it was on National File, where it said that a kindergarten teacher wanted to actually, get the 4-year-olds at the kindergarten to announce their pronouns, to actually label them in their pronouns instead of calling them by their... It's so messed up. It's so messed up.
You broke up a little there, but I did hear, I think, the gist of what you were saying. Sorry, what?
Can you hear me? I was just saying there was an article that I saw earlier today where there was a teacher who was labeling 4-year-olds as, different genders. It's so messed up, It is insane.
Yeah, no, I didn't see that specific story, but we're hearing more and more stories like that every single day, and it's absolutely disgusting. And it at this point, it's like, I don't even know how you could send kids to any school, let alone a public school. I don't know if that school is a public school, but it doesn't even matter anymore. It's like kids aren't safe anywhere. It's like these pedophiles have infiltrated every single space where kids are, and I just... It's almost like I don't want to become numb to this stuff. And I feel like I am, as a reporter, or as like even just regular civilians. Like, we're all sick and tired of hearing this stuff. And it's like, I don't want to have to watch a drag queen story hour and be like, oh, I've seen that a million times. Like it gets to a point where that's my reaction, and I don't like that. Like, why? Like, but that's all part of the tactic. It's a psyop. They want to normalize it to a point where people like myself, people like you, look at it and say, oh, I'm not even going to cover that because I've seen it so many times. But I'm glad that you brought my attention to that and everybody else, because it's important that we do keep covering these things. It's just sad that it's so normal now.
I heard today that apparently there was a governor who declared it a state of emergency. I think, what was it? Did you hear about that? He was declared a state of emergency because not enough people going to public schools, and he was like wanting to declare war on school choice. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's a new world order policy right there. Not wanting, kids, to get homeschooled. Did you hear about that, Anna?
No, but you're so right. That's like, you'll go to our shitty schools and you'll like it, and you can't go anywhere else. Like, that's so like Orwellian. Like, I can't even... I mean, as it is, we don't do very well with school choice in most districts and states. So, I mean, we still have a long ways to go even on that front. But to say that, like, oh no, we need to fix our public schools. Yeah, you're right. We do. We need to stop teaching all of these weird gender policies. Have you ever thought about not doing that? Then maybe people will be okay with sending their kids there. It's so crazy, because they're never going to blame the issue on the real problem. They're just going to look for excuses. They're going to be like, oh, well, everybody's just racist. They don't want to send their kids to public school, like as if that's an actual problem.
What would you say? What state does the best? What state does the best when it comes to school choice in America?
What state does the best school choice? That's a good question. I'm going to be honest here. It's not really an issue that I'm that familiar with, considering like it's not something that I have really looked into as someone who's not really a parent, but I've heard great things about Florida in this regard. I've even heard some good things. I have friends of mine in Texas that have kids, and they've said that it's much better than, because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and which is a mess right now on many fronts. But they moved to Texas right now, and they're there, and they've said that it's pretty good there. But I like a lot of the stuff that Ron DeSantis is doing to combat this in Florida. Like I said, I'm not the biggest DeSantis fan, especially as it pertains to the presidency, but I respect a lot of the policies that he's passing there to protect kids, at least from a lot of this gender stuff in public schools. That said, I'm not exactly sure how things. Oh, I will say, I believe it's Arizona where they have a pretty good school choice policy where they kind of allow you to attend schools if it's outside of your district. I'm not exactly sure the specificities of it, but I was reading about it the other day, and that sounded pretty good too. But again, it's hard because like even if you have school choice, like are these other options really going to be that much better if they're just using the same indoctrination tactics? Because it just seems like no matter
before we
what you
finish
do,
up,
you
Anna,
can't
is
escape
there
it. Sorry, what?
Oh, absolutely. So, by the way, Anna, what is that, artwork behind you? The artwork of like the snake. What is that? That's very interesting.
Oh, so this is the Join or Die flag, which I believe was actually designed by Ben Franklin during the French and Indian War, and they were trying to garner support for the unification of the colonies against the French and the Indians, who were trying to stop them basically from expanding westward. So, yeah, I'm really into
That's
history.
really, really cool. It's a nice flag.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
really
Yeah.
thought, that flag, I thought that flag was, I was kind of getting like Jormungandr vibes from, Norse mythology, the word serpent. What would you say, Anna, like in the world right now, what would you say apart from the American flag? What country would you say has the best flag in the world apart from the American flag?
Ooh, I don't know. It's a tough one. I never thought about it. I don't like when you can't see like what is. I actually like. I quite like the UK flag. I really like that. I don't. I like. I've always liked it. I don't know. It's just. It to me too. Like the entire UK is a symbol of. I mean, if you really think about it, they were the old world. They signed the Magna Carta in 2015, so that's where we derived a lot of our inspiration for our own Declaration of Independence and Constitution thereafter. But like, no, I've always had a deep respect for the history of the UK, and yeah, I like their flag a lot.
So, like I was saying, is there anything else you would like to say before we finish up?
I guess go watch my show Wrong Think, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday on LFA TV. We have a Rumble channel where it airs. We also have programming the entire day, so go check it out there. And also, I'm oh my gosh, I'm Anna. I totally forgot my own Twitter handle. I'm Anna Perez DC on Twitter, and I'm Wrong Think Anna on Instagram if you want to follow me there as well. So thank you so much for having me. I had a great time talking about these things. I love this long form conversation.
Thank you, Anna. And Anna, also one more thing. What advice would you like to give to the audience who are watching here, like who are people who are wanting to become like future journalists and people who think about, wanting to give up on their dreams? What advice would you give them? Like what motivational quote?
I would say don't be scared to take a different path. Don't be scared to take, and right now, like your options are better than ever before, because even though we're being censored more than ever before, more options are popping up. Like you have Rumble, you have, Clout Hub, you have all these great options. You have Telegram, you can make a splash in any which way, and any one of those things. And I just think that, don't listen to kind of the old guard narrative. Oh, you have to do it this way. You don't have to do anything their way. Think outside the box, and don't be scared to say something controversial either, to spark a conversation. and who cares if you upset people? I think we need to be scared. We need to stop being so scared of offending people, and we have to stop being scared of the labels that they're going to throw at us. Be bold, and I think that's, if you're bold and you're tenacious and you're and you don't give up in life and you keep your eye on the prize, I do think that there's a place for you in media, but you have to work hard, especially if you plan on going the more independent route. But you just have to be disciplined. And if that's the case, then you'll get where you want to go.
Well, thank you, Anna, for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
And I just want to say to everybody, please go and check Anna's show out on The Wrong Think, the network she's working for. It's a fantastic show. You'll really enjoy it. She's very good at journalism. She knows what she's talking about. Very underrated. Please give her all the support in the world. Check her channel out. Please remember to like and subscribe to her channel, where it's on Rumble too. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you for joining the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 111. Take care, everybody. God bless you all. Stay safe. Remember to never give up. Always remember to stay strong. Bye.